or maybe not at all, but spending most of today's show talking about ourselves, our home Taiwan, and our lives here. We should have put out an announcement soliciting questions, so we'll be going through those as well as any questions you may want to send us now. If you are thinking about moving here, then this is the show to be watching or listening to, or maybe, as Adam pointed out earlier, you look to want to listen to our experiences about living abroad. So, Adam, how long have you lived in Taiwan? Why did you decide to move here?
So I went a little bit into it when I did my interview with Ben. So basically, I've been here for 14 years now, just over. I arrived on December 24th, 2006, so like the day before Christmas or something like that. Uh, but anyway, it, long story short, because it is a bit of a long story. I was fresh out of college and I was looking for a job for a really long time. It was kind of bad timing because I had studied computer science, but this was between kind of the dot com bubble and when app development came out. So the iPhone wasn't out yet, so you didn't have all that. Google was not that old. I think YouTube was only a year old. So there wasn't the app development that you have now. Anyway, I spent a long time looking for a job, and then my cousin, he taught in Taiwan in Taipei for 2 years, and he said, you know what? Maybe what you should do is if you're having no luck here, you know go overseas, teach for a bit, pad out that resume, and then you can come back and it'll maybe help. And so I came here and I taught for with the idea of a year, probably two, and then from there I'd see it out. And after 2 years, I was like, nah, I'll just keep doing this. And then it was 3 years, and then 4 years, 5 years, and 10 years, and now 14 years. So going into 15. So, uh, yeah, never looked back. So you?
So first visited Taiwan in 2008 when I was living in Korea. Moved here in 2009. I will have lived here for 12 years come September, maybe 13. My math is always weird. I moved here for that time an ex-girlfriend of mine, which is the main reason. But I really love Korea, but the problem in Korea was the food choices were fairly limited. And as anyone in my family will tell you, food is super important to us. So Adam, what was your first year like?
Okay, well, it was a bit of a journey. Originally, I my getting here took me 71 hours, I think. So normally it takes about 24 hours to get from Virginia to Taiwan or from Taiwan to Virginia, but this took me 3 days. And the reason was is I flew from DC to I believe LA, and then my plane arrived late. And then because that plane was late, it looked like I was going to miss my second plane. But it turns out that my second plane had also been delayed. So then I got on that plane, and then we flew from LA to I think Seattle. But when we arrived in Seattle, because the first plane left late and then it arrived even later, my third plane had already left for Taiwan.
Oh,
So I was at the airport, and they're like, "Sorry, you missed the flight. Too late." You know, all my stuff had made it on time because you know how they put like your stuff on different planes sometimes.
yes,
So all my
yes.
stuff had already gone to Taiwan, but I was still in Seattle. And so then they said, "Okay, well, the next flight is tomorrow, so you're just gonna have to hang out here." So I just hung out at the airport all day, and then came back the next time and they're like, "Oh, the seats are all filled up. We have a couple other people that need their seats as well, so we'll see." And then I ended up not getting a seat on that second plane, so then I had to stay in the airport for a second day. So I had kind of my that movie The Terminal moment, where I
Yes.
was there for like 48 hours just in the airport. And it was one of those things where they were like, "Oh, okay, well, we can put you in a hotel, but you have to be back at the desk as soon as it opens, so you can go there for 4 hours." But it's like that's 45 minutes to drive to the hotel, sleep for an hour, get back on the bus, and drive back. So I was like, you know what, I'll just sleep on the chair over there. Um, so I did that, and then the second time they got me a seat, but it was yeah, it was a bit of a hassle with the airlines because it was one of those things where China Air was how I was getting from America to Taiwan, and China Air was like, "Well, we didn't cause you to miss your plane, so it's not our fault." So we can't be held accountable for you know compensating you for missing this ticket. It's not our fault. We can't do that. but I think it was Northwest. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was Northwest. But anyway, whatever airline that I had used to get to Seattle was like, well, our ticket says get you to Seattle. We got you to Seattle. We upheld our end of the bargain, so we can't compensate you either.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's like, well, it's like, yeah, you got me here, but you got me here like 2.5 hours late, and I ended up missing another plane because of it, you know. But they're like, yeah, but it just says Seattle. You're in Seattle. It's not our problem. So yeah, but eventually that got sorted, and eventually I ended up in Taiwan. So um, I got here, and yeah, I was in Taipei for I think 7 days or something like that. Did a little bit of training. Came down here to Kaohsiung. I came with no Chinese whatsoever, so I didn't know any kind of Chinese at all. I couldn't even pronounce the name of Kaohsiung, which, in my defense, it's spelt horribly. So if you guys are watching, I could type it out for you, but for those who are on the podcast, the way Kaohsiung is spelled is Kaohsiung. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, Kao, cow, right? And so I'm like, okay, cow. And then HS, I'm like, I'm like, okay, it's a hus, hus, kind of thing. So I'm like, okay. And then IUNG, young. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, Kaohsiung. And it's like, it's not Kaohsiung at all. It's Kaohsiung. And it's, yeah. So apparently there are different ways that you can type out Chinese, and there are different romanizations. And most of them are just awful. And you just cannot read it at all, which is weird. So like for instance, if people know like Peking duck, right? Peiking, right?
yes,
Peking duck. Yeah. So and then Beijing, right?
yes.
Those are basically the same word, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Bay
Peking
and
and
Bay,
Beijing
yes,
is basically the same word, but
yes,
just because of the different systems, it's got this really weird. And like Taipei is spelled Taipei, but it's pronounced Taibei, Taipei.
yes,
So like, why somebody was like, because that I don't really get, because we have English letters that make those sounds. If we didn't have that sound, like in Chinese, you have an e sound, and there's no real e in English, right?
yes.
So they use a German umlaut, the u with the umlaut, and that I understand. But yeah, like you have a g sound in English. Why would you write it as a k? Write it as a G, right? So like it's just this really weird. So yeah, I couldn't pronounce it at all. Um, but one of my biggest surprises was I got off the plane and I'm like, okay, I need my stuff, and um, I go to the counter and there's a girl there. She's around my age, early 20s or so, and she says, well, where are you from? And I say, well, in my mind I'm thinking, oh no, we're supposed to tell people we're from Canada. Don't tell people you're American. People don't like Americans. And previously I'd been to Germany and Ireland. I went there when I was in university, and the Germans were actually really, really friendly, but the Irish were not friendly at all.
What?
um, no, really, they weren't. I mean, granted, I was in Dublin, and I've heard later people say, well, that's not Ireland, that's Dublin. Dublin people are not friendly towards Americans. But yeah, when I was part of the marching band for our university, and we were invited to do the New Year's parade. And when we were marching, and they're like, oh, here's the James Madison Marching Royal Dukes. And everyone's like, coming all the way from Virginia, USA. Boo. You're getting booed by the crowd. People are throwing like wadded up pieces of paper, like trash, like that was holding their hot dogs and stuff, throwing trash at us. So yeah, I did.
Man.
Yeah, so it was not friendly, and that was Dublin, though. I don't know. Maybe the rest of Ireland is different. We went to the
How many years ago
countryside
was
fairly
this?
recently. This would have been in 2000, 2000 between 2002 and 2006.
Oh, that
So
was still
maybe
the
like
Bush era,
2003.
right?
Yeah, that was still the Bush era. Yeah.
That's why.
Oh, okay, but yeah, it was not friendly at all. So everyone's like, tell everybody you're Canadian. Don't tell anybody you're American. But the girl's like, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from America. And she goes, and her eyes get really big, and she goes, America, so good. And I'm like, wait, what? What's going on here? So that was really kind of shocking to me that the Taiwanese really like Americans. But I think that has to do with the history, because the Republic of China and the USA were allies in World War II. So they were pretty close. And even after that, the USA is kind of obligated to assist Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. So I think Taiwanese have a more favorable view of Americans than maybe a lot of European countries do. But that was kind of shocking to me. And then shortly after I arrived, I mean, I didn't have internet for a while. My laptop broke really soon after arriving. I had like a really old laptop. That thing broke. So I was kind of off the grid for a month. So my parents were kind of panicking. You know, where he went to Taiwan and he disappeared.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, so that was kind of a mess too. But eventually, you know, I think they ended up emailing the person who hired me, and that person got them in contact with my boss in in Kaohsiung, and then my boss was like, "You need to email your parents." But so yeah, I kind of went off the grid for a while there. Um, but yeah, and then I came, and I definitely made some early mistakes when coming to Taiwan. I would say the biggest mistake that I made was prioritizing work. Uh, I thought, you know, I'm going to be in Taiwan. Taiwan's a Chinese speaking country. It's going to be full immersion. And it's not at all, not even remotely. And I think this is something I noticed you had notes on here later on about how, you know, there's going to be a lot of Chinese. And for me, I've kind of, in a strange way, had an opposite experience. Um, but yeah, Taiwan actually has, because you said Taiwan doesn't have as good of English as Korea, you say?
I mean, when I first, because I came here 4 times from Korea, and I spent maybe a good 4 to 5 days each time. And at that time, when I was here, and then when I came to live here, I felt that where I lived in Korea, which is, I mean, Seoul's sister city, Incheon, English was better.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Taiwan's actually doing quite a bit of a push. Was it they say by 2030, English will be an official language alongside Mandarin
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Chinese,
mean, definitely
Taiwanese spoken
now,
language?
but I think when we first arrived, more than a decade ago, it was lagging far behind.
I guess I don't know. My experience was very different, but yeah. So a lot of people that where I would go, they would, you know, menus back then didn't have as much English on them, so I think reading would have been difficult. But a lot of people could at least give you some kind of pigeon English. But anyway, so I thought at the time, you know, I'm going to focus on work and I'm going to focus on making money, and the Chinese is going to come naturally because, um, you know, I'm just going to be surrounded by it all the time. And it's, you know, no, that was not the case. You know, I'll go to a restaurant, right? And they'll see me. And now, even now, they'll see my wife and she's Taiwanese, right? And they'll come up and they'll ask her, you know, oh, 你要吃什么? You know, what do you want to eat? And she'll tell them, and they'll turn to me and they're like, what would you like? And
Wow, what kind of
I
restaurants do you go to?
all kinds. This is like across the board, you know, like Japanese sushi places, you know, like Italian restaurants, you know, like traditional Taiwanese, you know, like they'll just say, they'll just ask me in English, what do you want? And then I'll tell them, you know, I'll say like, you know, oh, 我要蛋包饭, you know, amu rice, right?
Yes.
And they're like, oh, you want the rice omelet? Okay, what do you want to drink? Yeah, and I'll be like, 冰红茶. Okay, iced tea, sugar. I'm just like, but yeah, okay, no sugar. You know, and they'll listen to my Chinese, but then they'll repeat it back in English, and they do this all the time. Okay, so Ben has a question. So how do you feel that they do this to you? Is it offensive? They assume you don't speak the local language. No, this is not. This is not offensive at all. This is not the case at all. This is actually quite the opposite. They're trying to be polite, and it's a combination of them trying to be polite. And the other side of it is, you know, when I came to Taiwan, my thinking was, I'm going to be in a full Chinese environment. I'm going to learn Chinese naturally. You know, like that's, it's going to be all over the place. I go to a restaurant, the waiter is there. The waiter sees me and the waiter thinks, oh my God, it's a foreigner. I can finally practice my English. I never get to practice my English. This guy speaks Chinese every day. He's probably going to appreciate hearing some English. So let me practice, you know, so I'm going to practice my English because this guy hears Chinese all the time. So I'm going to practice my English with this guy, right? Because I really want to practice my English. And because of that, it ends up that I end up almost never practicing Chinese because everyone wants to practice English with me. So it's not a racist thing at all, and it's not like an offensive thing at all. It's they're trying to be accommodating. It's kind of funny. Um, Okay, so Ben says, in my experience with local Hispanic and our Afghani population in Fredericksburg, also feel really happy when I try to speak their language, even really poorly. Yeah, so that's the thing is they're trying to be friendly, they're trying to be accommodating, and to an extent, they're really excited that they get to use English because people like using English, and English is quote unquote the international language right now. I was watching a TED talk, and a woman said that something like if you look at every English conversation on the planet, 80% of those speakers are non-native speakers, and something like 60% of those conversations are between two non-native speakers. So, English is used by everybody. So even for Taiwanese people, if it's not just they see me and they want to speak English, they know that if they went to France and they can't speak French, the people in France might know some English. So, they can use English to speak to people in even non-English speaking countries. Um, there might be a Fredericksburg in Pennsylvania. I think so, but we're talking about Fredericksburg, Virginia here for
Oh,
Ben.
okay. Because I was really confused. I'm like, Fredericksburg? Because I swear I've been to a Fredericksburg, and I've never been to Virginia, but I did go to Pennsylvania a few times.
There's multiple Fredericksburgs. It's not quite as common as Springfield. I think there's a Springfield in all the 48 contiguous states.
Oh, this is.
So
Oh, yes, yes,
Alaska
this is
may or may
Springfield,
not,
Mass.
and Hawaii
Yes.
may or may not, but all the other 48 have a Springfield, which is part of the reason why Simpsons chose Springfield as the name of their town,
Oh,
because
I
then you
didn't know
can't
that.
nail it down. Yeah, yeah. So you can't nail it down because it could be in any of the main continental U.S. With the exception of, I guess, Alaska's technically part of the continent as well. But yeah. So yeah, they're just being really, really friendly. And so because I prioritized work, I became pretty busy pretty early on. So I would have my regular evening classes, but then I also took on back then what we called HA classes, which were half day
I
classes.
remember, yes.
And because of that, whenever we had like Chinese New Year or summer, they would move to the mornings. And so when I went to a Chinese class, I would take Chinese class with my friend, but then every time we had a break, my schedule would change again. And then I would miss out like 2 months of Chinese class because I just couldn't go. And the class would get way ahead of me. And then I'd have to like back up again and wait for another class. And then by the time like something would get ready or whatever, or, by the time we had enough people to start another class, then I would only have a month or two. And then it would, and then I'd lose 2 weeks or something like that, or 3 weeks. So it made learning kind of difficult. I know a lot of other people, when they come, they'll prioritize learning. And so they'll actually say to the boss, they'll say, I really want to focus on learning Chinese. So I need to have, I can't have more than this many hours because I need to focus on my studies. And they learn very, very well. They learn very, very quickly. I did not do that because I thought it was going to come naturally. And my Chinese development has been extremely slow. It drives my wife nuts how bad my Chinese is. And I've been here for 14 years. So hopefully my Chinese should be as good as a 14-year-old's, but it's not. It's closer to like an 8-year-old's. So, all right. So Ben says, you just reminded me, is it in poor taste for Americans to say Chinese New Year versus Lunar New Year? Okay. This is an excellent question. So, if you're in the States right now, there's kind of a push to call it Lunar New Year because that is the politically correct term. Because there are different uh, Lunar New Years. There's Tet, which is what? Vietnamese, right? I think Tet is the Vietnamese one. I think that's the Vietnamese term.
I don't
Anyway,
know.
there's Tet. It's one of the Lunar New Years. I think it's Vietnamese, but I'm not quite sure. Korea has Lunar New Year as well, right? Or a version of
Yes,
it,
yes,
right?
Chuseok.
Okay, so yeah, so they have that, and then here we have Guonian, which is year or country year, but yeah, so they have all these different lunar New Years, and so if you're in the States, that would be politically incorrect to say Chinese New Year because it could be offensive to other Asian nations that celebrate it. However, if you're here in Taiwan, it's perfectly fine because here we're not celebrating Korean New Year and we're not celebrating Vietnamese New Year. They share some customs, but other customs are different. And because of that, it'd be like in America if it's December 25th and you said, or December 26th, right? And you say Merry Christmas to somebody. And that day is Christmas. So or if it was like how many was it, the eight, is it 8 nights for Hanukkah? I think it's 8. if it's during Hanukkah and you said Happy Hanukkah to somebody, you know, I think in a way you say Happy Holidays. It's kind of like saying I don't know what you celebrate, but whatever you do celebrate, I hope you have a good one. But if you said like Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah, you're like, I celebrate Christmas. I want my Christmas to be enjoyable for you as well. You know? So in that sense, I don't think it's a problem. And if you came over here, people here still say Chinese New Year all the time. Um, they don't say Lunar New Year. Or they do. Sometimes if you see on posters, half of them will say Chinese New Year and half of them will say Lunar New Year. And the abbreviation they always use here is CNY for Chinese New Year. You don't usually see LNY here. So no, it's not. If you were here in Taiwan and you said Chinese New Year, it would not be in poor taste because, and this is something that I think is kind of interesting, is that in obviously there's a lot of I'm getting off the topic of my coming to Taiwan here, but this is all pertinent to living in Taiwan. In Taiwan, so in America, you people often hear about the one China policy, right? You know, there's one China, two interpretations or whatever. And so there's this idea of, you know, China, Taiwan is not China. And that's kind of an interesting distinction in that people will say Taiwan is not China, but Taiwan is Chinese. And that's because in English, you have two meanings of the word Chinese, kind of like how you have two meanings of the word English. English could be the language spoken by all these different people, but English could also be a person or something specifically coming from England. Ben's derailing our conversation here through the chat. But yeah, so because of that, you have Chinese as in Chinese culture, which is not bound by one country. That's why you can have a Chinese American. But you also have Chinese as in belonging to the country of China, similar to how you have English as in the language, but then you also have English as in belonging to the country of England, right? So if you have an Englishman, you know, an American is not an Englishman, but an American speaks English, you know, right? And in Taiwan, it's kind of similar, you know, like they're Chinese culturally, but they're not part of the nation, the People's Republic of China. And so for that reason, yeah, they would say Chinese New Year because this is a Chinese cultural thing, not the country. You know, it doesn't imply that we're part of the country. It implies that we're part of the culture. And then you also get a lot of people arguing that Taiwan is the true traditional Chinese culture due to the Cultural Revolution changing a lot of the infrastructure, or kind of the traditions and stuff like that. You know, things like one child policy and all that. And in Taiwan, they never had that. So there's definitely a lot of pride in Taiwan as to maintaining the traditional culture. We still use traditional characters here. We don't use simplified.
In the south of Taiwan.
In the south of Taiwan, they don't use simplified in the north.
No. I mean, but I mean, you said the tradition. I mean, going
Yeah,
into
okay. The north is
politics
a little more
here,
westernized. Yeah.
and I would say, you know, more pro KMT, which is one of the political parties here, and they're the ones who, even though they say no, we don't want to join with China, they're actually pretty pro Chinese party.
Yeah, but if you look at their policy, what it really is a lot of them will say we're pro joining with China if China democratizes. So they're saying like if China becomes more like us, we'll be willing to join them. It's a really weird political system.
Yes.
Or dynamic, I should say, not system, dynamic. It's a really interesting dynamic. But yeah, so anyway, I prioritized work, and so my Chinese didn't develop that well. And yeah, and then about 6 months after coming here, I met and ended up started dating my girlfriend, who is now my wife. So we dated for 3 years, and then we got married. So we've been married for 10 years now. Crian looks confused.
Oh my God.
What?
I was like 10 years? Jesus
We've
Christ.
been married 10 years. We've been together for about 13. All right. And we started dating on July 7th. So 7/11, which is
Oh,
easy to
wow.
remember because 7/11 is extremely important to Taiwan. Not the date, the convenience store.
Yes.
7/11 is love. 7/11 is life. If you come to Taiwan, you will understand the importance that is 7/11 to our lives. We might go into that later, though. But yeah, so I met her, and then I had multiple motorcycle accidents. I think I had 3 or 5. I can't quite remember. I got into
Jesus
a lot.
Christ.
Yeah, yeah. I have a scar here on my face. You
Yeah.
can't see it too well because it's like right in the wrinkle. But
Yes.
yeah, there's a scar right there on my face from where I cut up my face after hitting the side of a blue van and their mirror shattered into my face.
Oh
Uh,
no.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My wife has stitches on her arm from the same accident.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't have them right now. They're downstairs, but I have these little Buddha beads
Yes.
things. I have a yellow one and a black one.
Oh,
Um,
nearful.
I wear them all the time, but I don't usually wear them while filming because they
Oh
like
yes,
clack all the
yes.
time. So I end up I usually either take them off and put them right in front of me, but usually I put them downstairs in the morning and put them on when I go out. So I don't have them right now. Otherwise, I'd show you. But her mother got me those for good luck because I kept having motorcycle accidents. Uh,
What
so
was the last one you had?
the last one I had, I mean, I've had a couple little like small ones. Like I was driving one time and a guy cut in front of me and I swerved to miss him, but then I ended up flipping. Or not flipping, but like falling over sideways. But that was like a minor one. I just kind of like I scraped up my hand and cut up my hand and cut up my knee and just kind of picked up my bike and kept going. The last really damaging one was back in I guess it was 2007
Oh, okay. So
or
not
2008.
recently.
Yeah, I broke my shoulder blade.
Oh,
So
jeez. Oh.
yeah, the doctor was really impressed. He was like, "Wow, that's a really hard bone to break because it's in a weird place and it's a softer
Yes.
bone." So he was very impressed that I broke my shoulder blade. Um, but yeah, so I did that and that was fun. Yeah, and that was and then that was my first year. And then my only other note here is that I got gout after coming to Taiwan, and I was like, they're like, "Oh, we think you have gout," and I'm like, "That's impossible. Gout is like an old man disease that existed in World War One. It doesn't exist anymore." You know, and they're like, "No, no, no, you definitely have gout," and I was like, "What?" Um, but that was actually due to the change in diet. So, you know, obviously coming from America, I'm used to a Western diet. Coming to Taiwan, I was not used to the Taiwanese diet, and yeah, you know, when you're growing up, you build kind of a, what do they call it? Not a microbiome, but you know, you have your gut bacteria that's used to developing. Yeah, next I'll have scurvy, according to Ben. But yeah, so basically, my body was not able to process like say rice as efficiently. It's kind of like how some people are lactose intolerant, right? They can't drink milk, and then you have people who can't have gluten.
Mm-hmm.
Right, rice in Taiwan is extremely glutinous, like the sticky rice. And I'm usually okay with gluten, but it was just too much for me. I just couldn't eat rice. I can eat it like once a day, but you know, when I was living at my in-laws for a little bit while our home was getting ready, and we were eating rice for like 3 times a day, and I was just feeling sick all the time. Like
Oh
I just
no.
couldn't digest food at all. Um, but that's not what gave me gout. What gave me gout was actually because I was eating what people they call them lunch boxes here,
Yes. 便当.
and in America you have lots of say you have lots of trans fats, you have lots of fatty foods, right?
Yes.
And that's why Americans get nice and plump. In Taiwan, you know, people we're getting plumper here, but because we're eating a more westernized diet, but traditionally there was a lot of salt. You know, people in America look at MSG, they're like, "Oh, MSG is bad. Don't have MSG." Here MSG is like, "Oh yeah, add MSG to everything. Add more MSG. Just take the MSG directly," right? No, it's not quite that bad, but salt is really important here, and my salt intake was just way too high from the Taiwanese food, and my kidneys just couldn't take it, and they just couldn't clean my blood properly, and I ended up getting the urea crystals
Oh,
in
okay.
my bloodstream because my kidneys couldn't clean my blood. So I had to switch to like a 50-50 Taiwanese, a Western diet. So, you know, I'll eat, you know, like a sandwich for lunch, and sometimes I'll have like fried rice for dinner or something like that. But I have to mix it up because if I eat like a purely Taiwanese diet, yeah, I have problems. So yeah, that was something that was a bit of a culture shock to me because you know in the States you always hear like, okay, you know, the Asian diet is so much healthier. You know, that's why they live longer. That's why they're thinner. They're so much healthier. Um, and if you're considering the Western diet as in like McDonald's every day and fast food, then you're absolutely correct. Uh, yeah, but but yeah, I couldn't process it at all. But where was I? so yeah, so you know, the Asian diet is so much healthier. Well, turns out if you're going for like a traditional Western, like home cooked, like pot roast, like stuff that people were eating in the 50s or the 1920s, it's not actually all that healthier than a Western diet. It's just different. Here people have higher rates of liver cancer, and for instance, in the U.S., gout is more common than I thought. I looked it up. You have a 1 in 25 chance, so basically a 4% chance of getting gout in the U.S. But in Taiwan, it's 1 in 16. So they have a much higher rate of gout. It's pretty common here. They have a higher rate of liver problems. They have a few others. I think stroke is more common at younger ages here, I believe, as well. So yeah, it's just a trade off. I mean, they don't have the visible, like, you know, you're super big. It's
Mhm.
not as visible. They're thin. They look healthy, but internally, they're having problems that Americans don't typically have. And by Americans, I don't mean, again, if you're eating fast food all the time, yeah, that's in general not great. So really, what I think is the defines a healthy and an unhealthy diet is if you're eating out a lot and not at home. That's actually probably what's causing problems. If you're cooking your own meals at home, no matter where you are in the world, that's probably a relatively healthy diet. So in general. Yeah. Anyway, that's my experience. I don't know. You might disagree with me there.
I got some questions. The
Sure.
most interesting for me because I mean, so I'm South African. If you don't know, but so when I fly back home before COVID, I'd always have to fly through Hong Kong, and Hong Kong flights to Johannesburg, which is South Africa's like biggest airport, always leave around midnight from Hong Kong. Hong Kong and Taiwan are in the same time zone. South Africa is 6 hours behind, so it's about a 12 and a half to 13-hour flight depending on the winds. So whenever I've flown there, I mean, I've had to wait 4 to 8 hours. How did you survive 2 days in an airport? I mean, back in those days, there were no iPads or anything like that. What did you do for two
No, there
days?
wasn't. This was, yeah, 2006. This was prior to the iPhone. I mean, they had iPods. I didn't have one, but they existed.
So yeah, what
Um,
what did you do for 2 days? Because even me, like even with Hearthstone, the game I love. I mean, I could not sit down and play Hearthstone for an hour. I mean, when I was there for 8 hours, I played Hearthstone for an hour, walked around, shuffed, ate, sat down some more, played some more Hearthstone, watched some TV, got up again. I mean, what did you do for 2 days?
Mostly just hang out. I used my laptop a little bit, but like I said, my laptop was not in great condition. It was a really old one. Um, so yeah, mostly I slept a lot. They have TVs. I would go to wherever there was a TV and just sit down and watch some TV, whatever was on the news or whatever Discovery Channel thing was playing.
Huh.
I think in a lot of ways too, now it's one of those things where it's hard to imagine going back because now we have all those things, but back then we didn't. So you got used to figuring out how to occupy your time. But now we get bored so much faster and so much more easily than we used to. I feel like so. Yeah, back then I remember it felt like a really long day. And I just sit there and grab free packets of crackers off of the tables and whatnot. Eat crackers, but they gave me like one food voucher right for the entire day.
Oh God.
Uh, yeah, they were very nice, right? But yeah, I just hung out. I mean, it's one of those things where like you don't have much of a choice, you know. So time's gonna pass one way or the other, So you do something or you don't do something. Time's gonna pass. It's just a matter of how quickly is it gonna feel. But yeah, I just waited it out basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
Second question, or maybe a second thought. Because you mentioned like you said, even now people will speak to you in English in Kaohsiung.
all the time, all the time.
So I mean, I have a theory. Maybe that's related to skin color.
It's very possible.
Yeah, because I'm like people. Nobody ever speaks English to me in Kaohsiung ever. It sucks.
Oh yeah, no, they
Yeah,
speak English to me all the time,
it's like
all the
I
time.
go to Starbucks. Oh yes, yes, yes.
We're in the same city. We work together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I thought we explained this before.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anna and I work. in the same school. Yeah, I have a question. So I started off in Taipei as well, but I had to request to move to Kaohsiung. But you were originally intended to start teaching in Kaohsiung back
Yeah,
in.
so when I first came to Taiwan, before I came, they said, okay, you have three choices. You have Kaohsiung, Taichung, and Taipei. Those are the three places. And they said, sorry, I'm late to the partnership between you two, though. So basically, what happened was they said you have a choice. You can go to these three cities. Taipei is going to be the most westernized. There's going to be a lot of English. It's going to be really easy to get around, um, but it's going to be the most westernized. Kaohsiung is going to be the most local in that it's going to have the most kind of traditional Chinese culture, the traditional. Uh, people are going to be speaking more Taiwanese than they'll be speaking mostly Mandarin Chinese, but they'll also be speaking Hokkien, which is the local for some people. They also have Hakka and whatnot, um, but that's one of the original Chinese languages in Taiwan prior to Mandarin coming over. And so you'll have a lot of people that still speak this at home. And then you have Taichung, which is going to be kind of in the middle. It's in the middle of Taiwan, and it's going to be, it's going to be a blend. It's going to be a little more westernized than Kaohsiung, but it's going to be a little more traditional than Taipei. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to dive right into the deep end. Send me to the most local place you possibly can. So I requested Kaohsiung.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, I was like, I want the experience. You know what? Just throw me in. I'll do it.
Oh.
And so I arrived in Taipei because of the airport. Um, but yeah, then they shifted me down to Kaohsiung. So I was originally intended to go to Kaohsiung. Yeah.
What was your where did you first live in Kaohsiung? What road, what area?
I lived really close to our school one. I lived on Ufu, like right off one of the little roads off Ufu. Dali department store.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I lived like across the street from that.
Oh, wow.
So I was maybe
Okay.
4 blocks from where I worked, so I could just walk there. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I lived there, and then that's what Tianjin.
Xinjiang,
Never mind.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So that's Tianjin district, and then we got our apartment when we got married, and we moved up to Yixin Road
yeah. I know.
and near Fengshan, and then now we're in Sanming.
Yes.
So yeah. So all over the place. For people that don't know Kaohsiung, this is going to be nothing to you, but yeah, they're all different parts of the city, and that's another thing that threw me off was because I come from kind of rural Virginia, not super 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 rural, but pretty rural, and for us to drive to school was 15 minutes to a half hour down the highway. If you wanted to go shopping in town, it was 45 minutes down the highway, right? And so for me, we would be like, hey, let's 45 minutes, let's drive down the road, go see a movie, drive 45 minutes back, or, let's 45 minutes down the road. Right. So for me, that was perfectly normal. And I came to Taiwan and those are country miles, right? That's, you're driving down the highway. Here we're, city miles and something will be like 10 to 15 minutes away. And my wife will be like, oh, I heard of this really great yakiniku place. We should try it out. And her friends will be like, where is it? And she'll show it to them on a map. And they're like, oh, that's 10 minutes away. That's too far. No,
Exactly.
no.
I
And it's
agree.
like, that's 10 minutes. That's no time at all. And it's really not far because it's a city you driving, right? And it's like 10 minutes away is nothing. But, everything is so convenient here that 10 minutes is an excursion by Taiwanese standards.
I'm totally with the Taiwanese standards because I will not go. I mean, as I've gotten older, I will not go further than 15 to 20 minutes. There's a really lovely Canadian panini place. There's a poutine and other stuff by Sundor Road here. And I used to go there all the time when I was closer to that area. But now I live in Zoing. And the owner of the restaurant sent me a message. He was like, "Hey, Korean, haven't seen you in a while." I'm like, "Yeah, if I went to your restaurant and then I came back home, it would be like 45 minutes. So, no, thank you."
Yeah, I'm kind of fortunate. My wife doesn't have that. I don't know what you would call it, that habit. So we'll go all over the place. She'll drive like that. She likes this cafe that's out in Kaohsiung County, like out in the mountains. So we'll drive, half an hour to 45 minutes just to have dinner and then drive back.
Hmm.
So yeah, for us it's not a big deal, but for a lot of Taiwanese people, it kind of blew my mind just
Including
how.
me.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I never acclimated to the short distance. Never acclimated to the weather either. So
Me neither. Though I have
yeah.
gotten better. My brother always laughs at me because he sometimes I think he watches our videos. It's like, man, it's like 19 degrees and you have like a jacket and I have got socks on because I do feel a bit chilly.
I was thinking that you're wearing a jacket. I'm here short sleeves. But yeah. So that's my long story long. What about your journey into Taiwan?
Jesus.
I've
Uh,
occupied half of our time.
Fine. I already knew it was gonna happen, so I'm prepared. Um, Jesus. So,
In my defense, I covered most of my notes from the other parts, so I kind of front loaded everything.
well, let's see. I did pretty much the same thing as you. I came here September 2009. So flew Air Korea, so I didn't have a thing. I mean, from Korea to here, I think coming down is 4 hours, and I flew into Taoyuan Airport, which is Taiwan's biggest airport.
Yep.
And um, I started off. I lived in our school's apartment in Taipei, and I shared it with a Japanese teacher and another guy. And I always remember that time because I used to throw my recycling away in the trash. And the Japanese girl was like,
Uh,
"Hey, in Taiwan we recycle stuff." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
yes.
And Taipei was cool. It was interesting. I always felt like Kojin Taipei teachers were like really serious, and that was my impression. And then, because at that time my girlfriend lived in Kaohsiung, so I was like, "Hey, I want to go to Kaohsiung," and then she's like, "Yeah, you can." And I think I think they asked the ADs at that time, "Who wants a South African teacher from Taipei?" And the old school two boss from 12 years ago, Karina, she said, "Oh yeah, I'll take him." And that was that. And so I got an apartment very similar to Adam's situation on the corner of Minzu Road and Zhongjing Road, right close to school too. And I used to walk there as well to go to class. Unfortunately, like Adam, I think my first year or 2 years, because I had a girlfriend when I came, I
That's a great
spent
story too.
I spent time walking around, and we used to date Saturdays and Sundays. And I think I didn't teach too much, and I didn't actually go out to a lot of places. Like I remember I ate paigu bientang, which is pork bento box in English, pretty much every day, 2 days, twice a day, for a long time. And I used to have ketchup on that. That was it. I'm a person who loves repetition, so
Me
uh,
too.
yeah, I like to eat the same thing. I wouldn't say I like. I just prefer to eat the same thing because it just simplifies my life, saves time. And so that's what I did. And so I didn't learn a lot of Chinese. I think I did start learning the phonetic Chinese here, which is Duin, which is the Burpa Merfa, which is the alternative to romanization or pinyin. And I'd learned a little bit of that. I got some books, and I didn't really start taking Chinese class until after, I think, after I broke up with my girlfriend at that time. And then I had lots of time, and I wasn't teaching a lot at that time, so I did 3 hours a day, 5 days a week in National Kaohsiung Normal University, which was cool. Um, it was fun, but it's very similar to Adam's situation. Once, because I used to, where we work, uh, I think the workload goes up and down. Sometimes you got quizzes
Yeah.
and things and comments to write, and sometimes you're busy, sometimes you're not busy. So after the first semester into the second semester, and Chinese class at universities here, I mean, because you're paying for a lot, so you pay about $20,000 to $25,000 a semester, 4 semesters a year. It's actually more expensive than just studying and doing a regular bachelor's degree or master's degree. So in my second semester, I still kept on going, but I decided to stop because all my classmates must be 6, 7 years younger than me, and they were just students. Their job was just studying Chinese, and I was working, and I was like, no, this is just a waste of money. My teacher used to joke about how I never did homework. Not
I'm
being
not.
facetious, I'm legit really interested in this because I literally cannot relate. I just have no experience like you gotta have had internationally speaking. It's all right. Yeah, so after Chinese class, I met a friend of mine, Ruby, and she helped a lot with Chinese because she sort of helped with the face-to-face stuff because her English was bad and my Chinese was bad. So only way we could speak was just Chinese, and that helped a lot. And my current partner helped my Chinese a lot as well. And that's pretty much how things went. The first year was good. I turned on my AC a lot because I was living in Korea before, and Korea has like a real cold winter with snow. Um, and here, the summer was just terrible. Summer's literally reminded me of my hometown, Durban, South Africa. And I hate it. I still hate it now. Um, Summers suck. And yeah, also,
It's
like
so
Adam
bad.
said, very not a lot of Chinese. Not didn't really go out to like to explore stuff. I got my first scooter in my second year because my ex-girlfriend that time she was like, you really have to get a scooter. And I took the scooter test, but I think I failed the written once and I failed the driving two times. Because not to mention the instructors close to where Adam's house is right now, at that time they speak very almost zero English. And my girlfriend that time she told me, "Hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, don't do that. You have to keep on the line." And they have English study materials for the motorcycle license, but they're really bad. And the test is
Oh,
in
they're so
English, but
bad.
also in poor English as well. It's better now from what I hear from new people, but
I have a story about that. I printed off when I first came on. I came here. I printed off the list of the questions that they could possibly ask, and one of the questions it had a picture of the zebra lines for crossing,
yes,
and so you've got the vertical lines, right? Boom, 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 down, and then you have the two lines on top, right?
yes.
And then the question was, what do the diagonal lines indicate?
What do the diagonal lines indicate?
There are no diagonal lines. There's horizontal lines and vertical lines. There were no diagonal lines anywhere in the picture. And then the question was, what do the diagonal lines indicate? And one of them was like the path on which you can walk, and the other one was the borders in which you can walk. And so one of the answers was what the horizontal lines meant. One of the answers was what the vertical lines meant. One of the answers was completely random, but it was asking about diagonal. But there are no diagonal lines in the picture. So it was like, I don't know which question you're asking me.
Ah, Jesus, I remember that test. I'm so glad we don't need to do it.
It was so badly done.
Yes. Uh, oh wow, Crian, did you learn English in South Africa while you were stateside? Mentioned living in the US for a bit. South Africans speak English.
It's one of their national languages.
But don't worry, Ben. Is when I used to live in Boston, me and this Zimbabwean guy, we used to take the train from Worcester, Mass. to Boston, and we used to joke about. We used to do this like running commentary on the train sometimes to joke with the American people sitting around us. We're like, "Yeah, man, my mom told me there was a lion outside the house the other day," and like people would turn around like, "What? There's a lion outside your house?" We used to do this joke, and people fell for it all the time. It was not a good thing as well
Did they
because,
have lions in South Africa?
of course, yeah,
Okay.
lions, elephants, giraffes. I mean, the full zoo, but in the countryside, in game reserves and in yeah, in like real places where there are not a lot of people, because animals are afraid of people, of course.
Right, but I didn't know if lions like spanned all of Africa or just certain areas of it.
Not the south, because the south is too cold. Where Cape Town. But yeah, pretty much this sort of towards the Indian Ocean side of South Africa, up towards the north. The east coast of South Africa is not very populated, so maybe there as well. But I've never been to that side, the Atlantic Ocean side of South Africa.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I got a question. It's not technically a question for us, but it's a question somebody asked recently on the Kaohsiung Q&A. And it's a very common question, I imagine, and this is quite pertinent for us. Um, Someone's planning to move, a lady planning to move to Kaohsiung. She says, Do you have any recommendations of places to start looking, or know of any schools looking for teachers? Please let me know.
Oh, off the top of my head, I mean, no, I don't know any specific places that you can go. But so there's a couple ways if you're looking to come to Taiwan. What I did is I went to a website called Dave's ESL
Yeah,
Cafe.
me too.
Okay, so that's a really common way to find jobs, and they don't only cover Taiwan; they also cover China, Korea, Japan. I think there's Indonesia there as well, and
Yep.
Thailand. Pretty much, it might not even be only Asia. They might have non-Asian as well, but I think
They've
it
got
mostly
Europe as
focuses
well.
on. Okay, so, um, but yeah, so if you go to Dave's ESL Cafe, you can look for the country that you want, and people will post on there. If you're looking in, she says she's coming to Kaohsiung specifically.
Yep.
Okay. There's a Facebook group called Teaching in Kaohsiung. Occasionally, people will post on there because they know that there's a lot of foreigners on there. So, for instance, if somebody needs a substitute, sometimes they'll go on there and say, "Hey, I need a sub. Could anybody cover my classes for me or whatnot?" But occasionally, too, since people know that foreigners will go on there and talk to each other about it, people will post job listings there from time to time. But what I've noticed that a lot of people actually do, and this is probably not the best time with COVID-19, but what people used to do a lot was they would just come to Taiwan, they'd get their 90-day visa, and they would just, maybe spend a week just hanging out. And then after that, they would just walk around and just go to all the different schools, just walk around and it'll say, English school, you know, so it'll say like Hess English School, Kojin English School, Joy English School, you know, Michael's English School, right? And so they'll just walk around and they'll just pass out resumes to all the schools, and usually you'll find something. Yeah. But that said, and I have it in my notes here, do your research first, because there are a lot of horror stories of people coming over and having just awful times with it. Things, for example, where the school says they're going to get you a work permit and then they don't, or you do a year and then your second year they're supposed to renew your work permit and then they don't, and there's like a gap within it, or people hiring you illegally, and then when the Ministry of Education comes by, they have to shuffle you out the back door and hide you from them. um, I don't know if it's still true, but when I first came, it was actually illegal for foreigners to work in a preschool.
Still
uh,
true from what I heard.
Okay. So they would create what was called a kindergarten, because apparently it's not illegal there. But yeah, if you were teaching children under the age of 6, I believe, or under the age of 7 or so, if you were teaching children under a certain age, it was actually illegal. And so what they would do is, if the Ministry of Education showed up, they would get everybody out. Um, so yeah, make sure that you're sticking with, do your research, and look it up, because a lot of times, again, on Kaohsiung Living, or sorry, teaching in Kaohsiung, TEALIT, TEALIT,
Hmm.
which is teaching English and literature in Taiwan. Um, Formosa, I don't know how active that is, but go on there, type in the name of the school, and see if people are talking about it. And if people are talking about it, sometimes they'll say good things, sometimes they'll say bad things, but if it's a really bad school, people are probably going to mention it by name drop it. So make sure that you don't find any negative stuff out there. Um, but otherwise, you're okay usually. But yeah, it is, and that's the thing, is it is a bit of a gamble. Some people it works out horribly.
Hmm.
I know there was a couple, and they used to work for us, but they left for us to go to work for another school, and the other school promised them they get 25 hours a week, and it turned out that the school actually ended up giving them 0 hours a week,
Whoa.
to the point where they were like, well, we'll hold on to your work permit for you so you don't have to leave the country, but we're not going to give you any hours. So they're not making any money, and technically they're staying here illegally, because to have a work permit you have to be working a certain number of hours.
True, true, true.
um, but yeah, so that ended up being kind of a nightmare for them, because they couldn't work legally, because if they wanted to work for a different school, they didn't have a work permit for that school, and that school would have to go to their original school and get permission. And um, but then there are other people who end up working for these really small schools and absolutely love it. They have a
Hmm.
great time. It's very dependent on your boss, so it is a bit of a gamble, but it can pay off. But yeah, just be careful, do your research, check to make sure nobody else has complained about this place in the past. um,
Yeah, I'll add an addendum, like, oh, sort of not an addendum to what like Adam said as well. Is like Adam said, it just depends on your boss. So sometimes you might hear bad things about a school, like maybe the school we work for or other schools, and uh, again, it just depends because like some schools, they are operated like this particular branch might be operated by this guy and he has a bad reputation, but that same school has another branch where that boss is like really, really cool and people love it there. So it just, if you read about a school, take it, with some grains of salt. Like Adam
Yeah.
said, research is the key, and make sure you, if you can, talk to somebody who's been there, talk to people who have lived in that particular city as well. And you're not just limited to Taipei or Kaohsiung or Taichung. There's loads of places in Taiwan that will accept you. And some places, well, they're really, really looking for teachers in some places. You might not have the conveniences of a city, but you will probably get a pretty decent salary in some more countryside places.
You'll definitely make enough to if you're getting the hours, you'll definitely be make enough to survive there.
Oh, for sure.
We foreign teachers definitely make more money than the local average. So if the locals can survive, you can. And part of that is because we don't have family to rely on. Relying on your family is very, very important in Taiwan. A lot of people don't move out of their parents' home until they get married, so they'll stay at home until they get married. Um, and obviously, as foreigners, we don't have family to stay with and that sort of thing. So we are compensated a little bit by getting paid a little bit more. Um, and then also there's the idea that eventually, you might need a plane ticket to go back to your home country. So yeah, yeah, do your research. And again, like Korean said, and I would say if it's a big name school, one where they have multiple branches and multiple franchises or
Mm,
whatever,
yes.
those are probably on average a little bit safer because those are typically they got big because they have their stuff together. They know what they're doing. But again, you might end up with a bad boss. But and also take, yeah, like Kieran said, a grain of salt because sometimes people leave on not the best of terms
True, true,
and
true.
they don't accept responsibility for it. We've definitely had cases of that where you have a teacher who maybe their friend works at a preschool and they only work they don't have to grade papers, they don't have to do it. Or there's other schools where basically they treat the Taiwanese teachers as slave laborers. They'll hire university students for just super super cheap, just maybe a couple dollars an hour US, like $2 an hour or something like that. And they'll do all the grading and they'll do all that. And the foreign teacher just shows up and plays with the kids. And we've had it where, because at our school, it's a little more even. So we don't do any of the grading at low levels. We do half the grading at mid levels and we do pretty much all the grading at a high level
Hmm.
class. Um, so that's how it works for our school. But we've had people that they have friends at these other schools, and they're like, "Well, my friend doesn't have to work on this day, and my friend does this, and he doesn't have to do that. Why do I have to do all this extra work? And they're getting paid this, and I'm getting paid that." And then they leave, and then yeah, I've seen those people post things online about like, oh, they were horrible and they weren't accommodating, and it's like, well, that's because you weren't doing your job, like yeah, but
Yeah, that is that. I mean, is there anything we want to say towards the end? Anything you want to sum up?
yeah, I have like all these questions and stuff, and I realized that I spent too long setting my intro up with that half-hour long rant, and I'm like, ah, dang it, there's all this stuff I wanted to talk about, and
I think we could do this maybe.
our
Uh,
100th episode, do it again next
uh,
Chinese New Year.
no, 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 no. I mean, we could do a follow-up to this probably because there's the another holiday, right? The Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday holiday at the end of this month.
I thought it's just we don't have Friday off or Saturday off. I think we only have Monday off.
We only have Monday off?
The Peace Day,
Yes.
they gave me the because I actually just yesterday signed the pay sheet, and the pay sheet said that it only blocked off Sunday and Monday for
Oh,
Peace
that's
Day.
for coach? Because I feel like I could have asked some of my other schools because I feel like some of my other schools are just gonna. Well, I mean, for me, Saturday anyway, I don't have class anyway.
Oh,
Um,
lucky you! I work 6 days a week,
yeah.
and then
So
privates on Sunday.
Friday,
I work 7 days a week.
yeah. I mean, we'll have to see. Oh, then maybe we could do like an episode on a Monday maybe, and then
Oh yeah,
yeah, we could do an episode on that Monday. And
Yeah,
then
because I have all these questions that I listed out, and I was like, "Oh, this is a good question. That's a good question," because nobody was asking us questions, fans, and so so I came up with a list of my own. Um,
okay.
but yeah, all the typical
So
ones,
so
all the way from favorite foods down to how your relationships with your in-laws and that sort of thing. But anyway, we can go into that into another time.
sure. What do you want to talk about next week?
That's great. We got to get back into gaming. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any ideas or?
Um, oh wow. Actually, I just forgot about something that happened yesterday. I got an invite to Amazon Luna.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I forgot to sign up for it yesterday. That's
Last
maybe.
question made me feel pretty dumb. I'm staying quiet.
No, no,
Oh
no.
no, no, no! It's a good question. No,
Yes.
that is an actual misconception that actually a lot of people have
Ben,
because
loads of
when
Taiwanese people ask me that in Chinese. They're like, oh, so, wait, they always say in Chinese, like, oh, so in South Africa you speak English? And, I try to control the reaction on my face and say, oh, no, no, because, South Africa used to be a British colony. That's why we speak British English, even though I've sort of lost that accent.
but there's a lot of people in that speak Afrikaans as well, right? Because of the Dutch.
Minority, remember. South Africa is like 60, no, 65% black.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so it's the Afrikaans speaking people are very much in the minority.
Ah,
Yes.
I enjoyed you guys playing multiplayer on Vermintide. Good content.
Multiplayer
Thank
was
you very
cool.
much.
Yes,
I enjoy
especially
multiplayer.
us. Yes, yes. It was cool. I want to get back. We got to figure out times for all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so next week's episode, you were playing Windbound, you're playing
I actually just beat Windbound yesterday, but I'm
what?
doing New Game Plus.
I thought Windbound was quite long, like 20 to 30 hours.
Maybe I've played 20 to 30 hours.
Jesus Christ.
It's so much fun. It's super fun. And yesterday when I signed on, I was like, I'm kind of glad because I finished it, I guess, the day before and did and set up New Game Plus. There's only 5 chapters to the main game.
Oh,
And so I'm on chapter 3 of my New Game Plus, and then it updated. And there's all sorts of new content. So I didn't realize this. They added, this is their third, basically it's DLC, but all the DLC that they're adding is free, and it's adding a lot to the game. So I'm definitely enjoying it. And it's actually there's story to it too. So there's story to this DLC, which the other two didn't really have. So
okay. How about we do a new show next week?
sure.
Sure, and I'm gonna sign up to Amazon Lunar after this episode.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
So I should be able to talk about that. And then I think they give me, it's a very interesting email. They were like, yeah, as soon as you sign up for Amazon Luna, the trial, and you get the option to purchase the controller as well, because you cannot
Oh,
purchase the
nice.
controller without signing up for the trial.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we'll do a new show next week, Tuesday.
Sure. And says, so I'm using this time while waiting for Xbox games to come out to catch up on stuff I would have played already. Just finished Dead Cells and started with Ori, Will of the Wisps.
Yes. Good game. I've been meaning to buy that on the Switch.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of my indies. Finally, I started Haven. So far I'm a little disappointed, but we'll see how that goes. But I'm loving Windbound so much that I'm actually playing New Game Plus, which I almost never do, and I still need to finish Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
So let's say next week we do the new show, and then next week we do like part 2 of Life in Taiwan, and then the
Sure.
following week we can catch up. By then I should have finished some game that I can talk about while you can talk about Windbound and other stuff.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, sounds like a good plan.
Okay, then we will see you guys next week, Tuesday. We will be on time, and not another day.
Yes, that's my fault. I'm very sorry. We came right after the Chinese New Year. Oh, we should have talked about what we did over Chinese New Year, but we didn't. But yeah, and I knew that we were going to have an episode on Tuesday, and I woke up late, and that is 100% my fault. I'm very sorry for that, everyone. That's on
No,
me.
no, no. I mean, it's Adam. I mean, I complain about having a schedule. Adam has a schedule as well.
Yeah, and it's always changing.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Again, if you have questions, remember there's going to be a part 2 of this show. So tune in 2 weeks. The end of February, first day of March. We'll fill you guys in on social media. I have been bad about social media and posting stuff really because as soon as Chinese New Year finished, work started, things started getting crazy. But we will do better, and we will see you guys next week, Tuesday, which is what day exactly? Uh, February 23rd.
Yes.
All right, see you guys later.
Catch you later. Check out all of our Instagram and Facebook and all that.
Oh, yes.